like what we're doing is very old-fashioned in a way. Like, right, like we're telling stories. There's characters. You identify with the characters. You get hooked in. With Serial, we had this thought of, you know, when we put Serial on the air, This American Life was very popular, usually the #1 podcast on iTunes. And just to give a sense of numbers, on the radio, we are 2.2 million people listening on the radio, according to Arbitron. And then on the podcast, we're another 2.2 million are downloading each week. And it's traditional journalism. So every show sort of, if you start a story at the beginning of the hour, it wraps up by the end of the hour. Mm-hmm. And my producer, Julie Snyder, and Sarah Koenig, who hosts Serial, like they had the question of, could we basically compete with Netflix and HBO like head on and do what the best series do on television, and basically create a story that can unfold over the course of a whole season, and try to create something which would hold people, create characters in a situation where you would just want to find out what's going to happen, and see as an experiment, would people stay with a show that's nonfiction in a way that they stay with fiction shows. And it was basically our attempt to just like take on television. And so I think part of the reason why I succeeded was because Sarah and Julie did such a good job inventing a story that people wanted to find out. I mean, partly it's about teenagers and murder and sex, and you know, just like, and the world of it is so interesting. And then you get, and then the people at the center of it, especially Adnan, is you don't know what to think of him in the way that Sarah Koenig, the host, really is not sure what to make of him for the entire series. Mm-hmm. And all of those things are just very sticky things that I think that the audience got caught up in the way that we do. I mean, like we're public broadcasters, so we don't market test shows before we put them out. We basically, it's very golden rule. Like we feel like we're average people and we find this compelling, we assume other people will too, and that's really what we did.
Yeah, I mean, one of the you mentioned one of the things that fascinated me the most about it. Well, there were two things. One was that it's not a new thing to bring fiction techniques to nonfiction, but I can't recall, maybe you can, in television, anything that took that. That did for nonfiction what fiction does, and took it across so many episodes. That to me, I think, was unique.
There's a very good TV series called The Staircase that I think some people might have seen, and it's great, and it has the same feeling that Serial does that we looked at before doing this. But it wasn't. I don't think it had the kind of distribution that, you know what I mean. It just never reached as many people. So somebody had tried it on TV, but honestly, we don't know of anybody else either.
And the other part you mentioned is that Sarah is a character, and so
yeah.
she in a way it's the first person, the producer as the character, the storyteller as the character, is such a trope in fiction, and it worked so well here. It was astonishing.
And like you say, like it isn't a new thing for journalists to use the tricks of fiction in making nonfiction work. Like people have been doing that since the 60s, new journalism, Tom Wolfe, like there's a whole generation of magazine writers who came up. One of the things that our show, This American Life, has been conscious of from the beginning is that we felt like the way that broadcast journalism is presented seemed very old-fashioned. Mm-hmm. Just the way the presenters, the way that the newsmen literally perform their lines, the way their lines are written seemed very stagey and corny to us. And from the beginning, like I and all the other people who are on the show, we felt like we want to talk more like regular people talk, and also have a much wider range of feelings, and let there be funny moments in stories, and let there be emotion in stories, and that we ourselves, our subjective take on the story, can be part of the story, as long as in a mainstream media sort of context, which we are, we're fair to all sides, and fair-minded in the way that we're approaching the material. And so I think that's one of the reasons why Sarah is able to be a character, because at the heart of the journalism is a sense of like the person the journalist plays is different.
Well, it's the way I've thought about This American. I've told you this. I don't think I mentioned it to the audience. I lost 40 pounds listening to This American Life on the treadmill at Equinox on 61st and Lex. And it was just a way, it started out as a way of just passing the time to take my mind off the pain. And then it became a compulsion. And part of the compulsion was that I never knew what I was going to, what to expect from one week, one podcast to the other, because there was such a mix of styles, literally like a magazine, like a store, a department store where you can go from fine fashion to street fashion to something. But did that evolve over time, or was it it was conscious going into it that was what you wanted to do?
There are certain things that were there at the beginning, but the show's been on the air for 20 years now. And so there are definitely things that we picked up. I mean, over the course of 20 years, like what happened when the show began, it was very much about applying the tools of journalism to stories that were so personal that journalists wouldn't have done them. So there were a lot of stories about families and people starting businesses and people in their own personal whatever. And you watch them, and then they would tend to have the kind of plots that like a little movie would have. And again, with a real mind towards like finding characters who are interesting and stories where the plots were surprising and they drive at ideas that are surprising and some thought about the world that you haven't heard before. Like all of those are part of like what we're trying to make and part of what we think about as we're constructing the thing. And funny moments and emotional moments and all of that and something to relate to. And what happened is, like, we did that for years and years, and then we just got very interested in doing the news. And so we especially after 9/11, and we just started taking stories that other people were doing, the invasion of Iraq, the war on terror, like the economic meltdown, and basically we then proceeded to take that style and apply it to these other things. We would send a reporter to Iraq for a month and a half, or, just do these big stories where you'd have characters and scenes and plot and motion in the way that we like.